Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 1 of Cable, written by Fabian Nicieza. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. So with that said, this issue opens up outside of an Orchis facility with sentinels standing guard. And when we get there, we are met by Cable arriving on the scene ready to throw down. Now, once upon a time, a sentinel meant little to nothing to Cable. In fact, Cable was so capable that back in the day, he could have taken out a sentinel with the contents of a single pouch. But now, due to the Stark tech enhancements, he is forced to be a little more subtle. So before the sentinel was able to do anything, Cable took out a blade and sliced a hole in the sentinel's leg and climbed inside. And within moments, he was able to completely dismantle the robotic nuisance. Now, when it comes to this facility, Orchis built it as a prison, and they also claim to use this place to cleanse the mutant pollutants, but that is just a nice way of saying incarcerate them forever. So with an endless supply of guinea pigs at their disposal, Orchis decided to go digging into the minds and bodies of said mutant prisoners. So with all that going on, Orchis just so happens to have one prisoner. The Cable will prefer them not to go digging deep inside of, since that prisoner's mind and body happens to be his own. So with the outer defenses taken care of, Cable tells Bella, aka his arm's AI, to copy all their files, and also to make sure to delete them from their mainframe once completed. So with that order given, Cable then uses his techno-organic arm to create a giant weapon in typical Cable fashion and blows a hole into the facility. And once in, he tells the workers that they know exactly who he is, and they also know that he fought every single day of his life, and the crazy part is, he is ready to fight again. So he leaves the choice up to them in regards to what they want to do. And as you may have guessed, most of the soldiers took Cable up on his offer and proceeded to run away. But just because some of them were smart enough to leave, didn't mean all of them were. Because some chose to run headfirst into a losing battle. So once that facility was clear, Cable compiled the downloaded data dump and turned his attention to a cargo ship. A cargo ship that was transporting his younger self. Now, when it comes to the two Cables, Nathaniel, the younger Cable, managed to come back to the present before the older Cable. But unlucky for him, he got caught back in issue number 24 of X-Men. So while he was under captivity, Orchis studied his tech and memories because they thought that the younger Cable's technology and defenses would be much weaker than the older one. And lucky for them, they were correct, because via their research, Orchis managed to gain intel on his techno-organic arm and possible future timelines. But nothing too damning in the grand scheme of things. So with Cable being successful in freeing himself, he quickly takes him back to his safe house in Hell's Kitchen. And once they are there, the two of them gear up for an offensive attack against Orchis until something strange catches the older Cable's eye. Because within the data dump, the older Cable found a tag that said the Neocracy is coming. Now Cable then goes on to explain how this is a bigger threat than Orchis at this moment. So with this threat on the horizon, the two Cables go to meet with an ex-reporter from the Daily Bugle by the name Irene. Now at first, she has no idea who the graffiti artist is, but she tells them that she may know someone who does. And that is when we jump over to a police department to meet with a detective, who just so happened to have the name of the person they are looking for. So following that, we fast forward to nighttime with both Cables coming eye to eye with the artist in question. And after a few questions, the tagger quickly gave up the number of the woman who paid him to spray paint that phrase all over town. So with a new target in sight, Old Man Cable disguised his vehicle as a taxicab and proceeded to pick up the woman who footed the bill. And before she knew it, Cable managed to kidnap her and took her to a rooftop for questioning. And funny enough, this woman told them everything they needed to know and some. She told him that the people she worked for wanted a super slow burn rollout of their new brand. Just slow enough to get people talking before they are ready to release it far in the future. So with the information acquired, the two Cables stop in a park to grab a bite to eat. And while they are having their meal, the older Cable asks the younger one how many timelines he has been to. In which the younger one states, enough. But see, the older Cable continued to say, if he never heard of the Neocracy, then his answer should have been not nearly enough. Because the older Cable tells him that technically he never ran into them himself, because he always ran from them. So with that said, this is when the older Cable tells his younger counterpart a story that hits home, a story of failure, a story of fighting and of losing. He tells him that he slid into a lot of timelines in his travels, and in a lot of those timelines, the Neocracy was the focal point. Not the Sentinels and not Apocalypse. He mainly ran into timelines where they do it to themselves. And in those timelines, a pharmaceutical company discovers a way to rewrite human, mutants, and humans, and even aliens' DNA, because their goal was, is, and will be to end the conflict born of what divides us by making us all the same. They were able to evolve us into one singular race of energy beings that was more enlightened, unified, and at peace. But all it cost was a person's individuality, basically knowledge without the pursuit or thrill of the accomplishment. A world without hate, but also without love, without a sense of life. Now, this was such a big threat that Cable never stayed long enough to learn the details of how they rewrite everyone's DNA. In fact, he couldn't even stay or breathe the air itself in their timelines, because just being there would start to change him. And the scary part is, this group is using the battle with Orchis as a distraction and a starting point. And as for the graffiti tags, that is an introduction to decades of coordinated propaganda meant to prepare everyone for this new age, and the woman who hired the artist was working for the company that will change the world. So with that out there, the two Cables load themselves up with all their weapons and prepare to move out, and as they stood outside of the facility, the older Cable tells the younger one that this group wasn't a threat in a lot more timelines than they were, and maybe it's because someone acted quickly. Or maybe it was because they were the ones who acted quickly. Because he is tired of being from the future and always out of time. So with a sense of purpose in preventing a future disaster, both of the Cables stormed the front entrance and opened fire as the security guard took off running for his life. And once inside, the empty facility alarms went off, and out of nowhere, something slimy grabbed hold of both of them. And while this is going on, Cable notices something familiar about these creatures, so he tells his AI to run a genetic coding scan on them. And via that scan, they learn that these creatures have traces of human and mutant DNA in them. They have DNA from Slack, Glob, Herman, and Random. Now the only way this is possible is if the company has already been experimenting on cellular transformation. And by the looks of it, it was pretty successful so far. So with all this chaos going on, Old Man Cable tells the younger one to push out with his mutant abilities. And in a gigantic explosion, the creatures exploded all over the lab, so with little time to waste, both of the Cables proceeded to make their way into the lab, as the creatures started to reform themselves. So with great effort, the two Cables did everything they could to put some distance between them and the creatures, and in a last-ditch effort, the Cables exploded a Freon line, which froze both creatures in their tracks. Now with that threat avoided, they made their way into the genetic mapping lab, and once there, they are met with a lot of high-value medical records, which begs the question, how do a private company get access to government and individual medical records like they did? In which Dr. Pale Pierre Duval says legally. Now this was a surprise for even Cable, because he had no idea that this dude was a true believer. So with the pleasantries out the way, the doctor began to take off his jacket as his body started to grow. Because it makes sense for this pharmaceutical company to turn to scientists with experience and biochemical and genetic alterations. And who better to turn to than a scientist who already experimented on himself, a scientist like the Grey Gargoyle. So with that said, this first issue of Cable comes to an end. Now I have to say that I rather enjoy this comic for how it started off. Because unlike the other mutants in the X-Men lineup, Cable has a history of going against threats that haven't yet fully materialized in their current time. So it's only right for Cable to be going up against a future threat that goes beyond the Orcus agenda. Like in his previous Children of the Vault story, while everyone else was going against Orcus, Cable and Bishop were the only ones worrying about another thread on the horizon. And I also want to bring up how I enjoyed seeing the relationship between both Cables playing out within the story. So with that out there, if you want to stay in the loop about any individual storyline, then how about you hop over to the playlist section down below or in the link cards above to get all caught up on the X-Men runs. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.